Namaste. Welcome to our 93rd talk on the Bhagavad Gita. We're obviously drawing very near to the end of it all, and we've covered an incredible number of aspects of spiritual life. The Gita needs to be read over and over and over again. In fact, reading a chapter a day of the Gita is a very good idea, except for the first couple of chapters. They're all really quite short, some of them only just a few pages. So it's easy to find the time to do it. And it never gets old, and always new meanings can be found. This is actually the characteristic of a genuinely inspired scripture, because God is infinite. God is infinite variety. And therefore, you can read a scripture over and over and over again for years and keep discovering new meanings or new shades of meanings or new applications of the principles. It's really quite miraculous. And I first read the Bhagavad Gita in 1960 and have been reading it ever since, and it's always new. In the evening, I usually read something out of the Gita. I have three translations actually on a table right by where I usually sit in the evening, and I'll just pick up one and turn it random and just read some verses. And it's ever new, and at the same time ever old. I have written about this, I think, in my introduction of my version of the Gita, that when I read it, I didn't feel it was a historical document. I didn't feel that I was reading the words spoken thousands of years ago on the battlefield in north central India. I felt like my own soul was talking to me, literally. I didn't think these are the words of Krishna. Of course, they were. Uh, uh, but the way it felt as I read it, it was, I am talking to myself. At last, my real self, my soul, my spirit, my true being that's been buried all this time has emerged and is talking to me. And yet at the same time, I didn't feel that I was learning anything new. I felt I was not even learning something, I was remembering what I read. I was remembering these great truths. And so the Bhagavad Gita is for me very, very unique. Its teachings are amazing. So now, here on the 67th verse, Krishna is, of course, winding things up. And here is something interesting he says to Arjuna. It begins with the word this. By this, he means all of the conversation that they've had so far, all of this discourse on Dharma. This should not be spoken of by you. Now, this is interesting. He doesn't say, don't speak it, don't even tell about it. This should not be spoken of by you at any time to one who is. Okay. Here's going to be a list of the people that you're wasting your time talking about, either the Gita itself or about the ideas found in the Gita. Now, that doesn't mean God will be angered and you will be making bad karma and doing something wrong. No. Krishna just wants to spare us from wasting our time. All right. This should not be spoken of by you at any time to one who is without tapasya, a yogi, a practicing yogi, a meditating yogi, one who does japa and meditation and follows yama and niyama, especially in the aspects of purification. Because if the mind isn't clear, how will it understand these incredible truths? You see? You don't speak philosophy. Horses, dogs, cats, various animals could be incredibly intelligent. But you don't go out and talk philosophy to them because the way their brain is set up and the point of evolution that they're at and the condition and nature of their mind, they can't understand it. So, first of all, those without tapasya and do not purify and clarify their minds, especially by their diet and their personal habits, moral especially, and frankly, the kind of people they associate with. Remember, Yogananda said, company is greater than willpower. You can be turned into a degenerate person, slowly, of course, but you can be turned into a degenerate person merely by associating with degenerate people. This is the truth. So, we don't say this to anyone who is without tapasya, nor to one who is not dedicated. Devoted is also a good word. In other words, not someone who just knows about spiritual life and thinks that's true. Not even a person who, even if they read the Gita daily, that is not following the principles of the Gita and the way of life which supports it, the following of the principles of the Gita. This is incredibly important. They have to be devoted to it, not like I really believe in that. You know, I'm interested in that. I'd like to hear some of that, etc. No, that doesn't mean you say, "I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. The Gita tells me not to." Go ahead and speak, but don't get enthusiastic and go deeply into it, and don't expect it to have any effect. Though it may, but that will be their choice. All right. Nor to one who does not desire to listen. Naturally, when we are really relieved to find the truth at last, or when we've thought about something and kind of had a philosophical knot in our thinking, and suddenly we find the solution and the knot is loosened, well, of course we are pleased. Of course we are enthusiastic about it. But why talk about it to people who don't want to know it? But I understand it. I've read some stuff and I got all enthusiastic. I read the Gita. And there was this friend of my stepmother's who called on the phone and she kind of said, "Well, what are you doing?" And like a fool, I said, "Oh, I've been reading this really amazing book. It's called so and so." And I talked to her about it. Now, this woman, first of all, I don't think had a normal IQ. She was maybe about 95. A very nice person, which doesn't mean anything as far as intelligence goes. And she would just keep saying, "Well, ain't that something? Well, ain't that something?" I mean, I put the poor woman through something she didn't deserve. But so, anyway, there are those who don't want to hear. Now, they may ask you a question, but what you have to tell them, that they do not want to hear. They don't know ahead of time they won't want to hear it. But when they hear it, oh my. So understand that and watch the people you're talking to, because if they get bored, if their mind wanders, well, don't torment them. Just let it drop. Nor to one who speaks evil of or mocks me. I'm an agnostic. I don't see there's any need for God. Yeah. And after all, look at the way the mess of the world is in. That is speaking evil of God. When you do this in this context, well, God did it all, so what's this? And I don't see how, and all, and mocks, makes fun of believing in God. Oh, you believe in his fairy tale? Oh, you mean you believe in Santa Claus in the sky? Be quiet. Don't challenge him. Don't deny it. Don't say you don't understand. Of course, they don't understand. They don't want to understand. Just say, oh, well, we all have our way of getting through life, and let it be. This is really important. Jesus said, cast not your pearls before swine. Why? Because they're unworthy? No. Because he said, lest they turn and they gore you. See, they rend you. They'll attack you. And it happens, believe me. There are some people who are very protective of their evil and their ignorance because they know that it isn't right. And they know that in a sense it's fragile. In other words, truth can just dispel it in a moment. So you just drift towards something that threatens their habits, their addiction, intellectual addictions. And they say, I remember this happened one time. You can't believe it, but I tell you, I really did one time work for a radio preacher, a Bible pounding Protestant radio preacher. It lasted 1 week. And I realized this is a bad place. I should get out of here. But they had certain beliefs by which they fostered and excused the fact that they were evil people who lived and did evil things. That sounds judgmental, and it is. They were awful people, actually. They were racketeers. They were religious racketeers, you see. I hadn't known that when I went, interviewed, and they hired me. So, anyway, they had certain of these beliefs that were really real pathetic. And I just said something, not with their ideas in mind. I said, well, if something happened, then something might this be the result. The man says, what you're getting at, as if I was even sneaking around on him, wanting to attack him. See, guilty people always think that too. You're attacking them. You're somehow trying to hoodwink them. So anyway, uh, uh, and they like to make fun of the views that I, for example, felt were right. And so when as I say, I just barely, he said, what you mean? Is that so? Yeah, and that was exactly what I wasn't meaning it. I was sneaking up on him because I knew he didn't believe it. I wouldn't want to bother with him because I didn't want to argue. But then, so you have this. So uh, someone one time came in and told something or other of something he was doing with supposed spiritually aspiring people to Shamachar and Lahiri Mahashai. And he just quietly said, Sadhu, beware. And Sadhu didn't beware. And Sadhu fell and was no longer Sadhu. All right. However, now he said that, who not to talk to. Then it says, he who with supreme devotion unto me, this is the motive that's necessary. Not, I want to help this person out. A lot of people, you can't. So anyway, I want to help them out. I feel I'm obligated to speak the truth. La 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 la. No. It's with devotion, not to them, but to God. With your mind fixed on God as you talk with them. He who with supreme devotion teaches this supreme secret, this highest teaching, unto my devotees. In other words, those who it's already been shown they want to go toward God. It doesn't mean they have to be super religious and sit around and talk philosophy all the time. No, but it means you see, these are people whose hearts are open to God and therefore they can go to God because that's what the Gita is about, going to God. So, so he who with supreme devotion to me teaches this supreme secret unto my devotees shall doubtless come to me. In other words, this is a karma, a great karma. The highest truths being spoken to people who are aspiring to know. Can you think of a more positive action that you could do? For example, you can raise somebody from the dead, but they're going to die ultimately anyway. You can heal someone's disease, but they're going to get sick in the future anyway, and they're going to die. So, those who teach this all the while themselves with the consciousness that they're advising to others, they will then attain to God. Now, no one gets there by teaching the Bhagavad Gita, but that's one of the things. If you live the Bhagavad Gita, well, it's guaranteed. You don't if you don't never tell it to anybody, as long as you tell it to yourself, you're all right. And no one among all men shall do more pleasing service to me, nor shall there be another on the earth dearer to me than he. Oh, right. This is getting into very good company. Let's think. No one among all of humanity will do anything that is more pleasing to God. Not please, he's in the egoic way that things are to us. But that means it's completely in synchronization with the plan of God for the liberation of all sentient beings. And knowing these truths is essential. So that's pleasing service, and there won't be any other people even dearer. Now, there'll be maybe billions that are equally as dear, but in the end result, we are all one. So we will all have, in the times of when we're enlightened, we'll be exactly the same. We'll be in the same level, but there won't be anyone higher. In other words, no miracle yogi will be dearer than you, and no avatar will be dearer than you because you're teaching the truth, the avatars teach the truth. So on that one level, you're their equal. And he who will study this dharmic dialogue of ours, because he knew, naturally, being God himself incarnate, he knew that Vyasa would write this, naturally. And he who will study this dharmic dialogue of ours, that's the important thing. It's about dharma. It's about the life that leads to self-realization. By him will I have been worshipped. Don't have to go to temples and bow down. Don't have to make offerings, recite praises, and so on. Not that these aren't good things, they are. But just doing this, I will have been worshipped through the sacrifice of knowledge, jnana yagya, the offering of wisdom to God who is seated in the heart of those people. I'm talking to God when I talk to you. Of course, then I could turn around and say, well, when I talk to you, God is talking to you. So listen to me. But that isn't the way it works, I'm glad to say. So by him I'll have been worshipped through the sacrifice of knowledge, which it means wisdom, jnana, insight. Such is my conviction. In other words, God thinks this. Even the man who hears this, full of faith, in other words, he believes there can be a higher life. It doesn't mean that before I speak it, a person will believe it. I met someone like that one time. He had some little cracked idea. I forget what it was. I mean, Protestants are infinitely capable of coming up with some weird interpretation of a Bible verse or creating a whole dogma of their own. And I said, well, please explain it to me. I wasn't challenging him. He said, no, because you won't believe me. Would you believe me? I said, well, how can you ask me to believe something I don't know what you're going to speak? So that didn't go any further. So even the man who hears this, full of faith, but not gullible. See, sometimes you can hear a discourse and 95% is absolutely good, and 5% isn't quite right, it's a little off, or maybe it's completely mistaken. Well, you see, the wise ant can find a heap of white sand and sugar mixed together, and he takes the sugar away and he leaves the sand. Sri Ramakrishna said all scriptures are a mixture of sand and sugar. And when you read them, you should read it with discrimination and yet with some confidence in your own ability to understand and evaluate these things and carefully look and see. First of all, with us, these are translations, so someone could mistranslate. However, this, believe me, I went through every single word before I chose the English. All right. Even the man who hears this, full of faith and not scoffing, he also liberated. Now you understand just listening to the Gita and believing, but it means he embodies it. See, hearing is more than with the ear. Jesus talks about people that have the ears to hear. Well, everybody's got an ear, but they can hear the words, but their inner being, their very heart, does not hear them as they are and therefore respond as the response needs to be. So he attains the happy worlds of those of righteous deeds. In other words, yes, this is one of the ways to make sure you don't come back to this place, that you don't come back to the jail. You know, the great uh, contemporary master Neem Karoli Baba, who lived in northern India, usually in Brindavan, he always called the this world central jail. By that he meant the county jail, and that's what it was. And we're all prisoners here. We're all convicts here, which we have to understand. And let's have a prison break. Let's get out. And for that, yoga is the key that will turn the lock of our prison cell. So then he asks two questions. Has this been heard by you with a one pointed mind? I mean, have you really been listening and every bit of your mind was right there? And have you been really intent and discrimination, weighing what I've said? Absolutely, that's important. Then has the delusion of your ignorance been destroyed? Because reading it and believing it, if the ignorance is not dispelled, and ignorance is, we're dyed deeply in ignorance in, in our inner being, unfortunately, because of all the lives of ignorance. But so, is that destroyed? That's what we have to really know. Like, oh, ever since then, I never ever did this or that that's negative. That's usually the proof of having gotten saved. But we don't want to be saved, we want to be liberated. So these are the questions. Now, Arjuna gets a word in edgewise. My delusion is destroyed, and I have regained my knowledge through your grace. You see, he's just like me. What I said when I read the Gita, I thought I was remembering it then, and he says that I've regained my knowledge. In other words, of course, as part of the infinite being, as a divine self, we we all knew this. I'm not telling you anything new to you. You knew it from eternity. But we came into the dream world and we forgot. In a dream, we often forget even our real identity, or we forget where we really are. We dream we're on the other side of the world and think we're there when we're not. So, my delusion is destroyed and I have regained my knowledge. It's a recovery through your grace. That's true. It is the grace of God, the mercy of God. But if you don't have your grace and your mercy toward yourself, then it will be in vain. There were some people that were sort of habitually going a little off. I mean, they weren't doing terrible things, but they were habitually glitching, let's say, that lived in the ashram with Yogananda. And there were two or three of them, and Yogananda was explaining to them. By the way, he had the ability to blast people too. It was needed, but he hadn't in this case, but he was very straightforward. And they said, well, won't you give us your blessing? And he said, you've already have my blessing. You already have God's blessing. What you don't have is your blessing. There you are. Just as when some people came and they made some gripe about something they didn't like. And of course, they wanted him to say, oh, I'm so sorry that it's that way here, or, oh, well, I'll take care of it right away. Is they said their little complaint, and he walked out. And as he walked out, he said, change yourself. See, that's what life with a master's life can be very like. It can be very excruciating. So I am firm and my doubts are gone. That's important. There shouldn't be any lingering doubts. You don't feel guilty about it saying, oh, I shouldn't have doubts. Yes, that's a symptom. That means something. And you need to learn something more or experience something more. So there's nothing wrong with that. No true teacher, if you don't believe something they say, will get angry, will get upset. Or as a man said after he had told me that he was Jesus Christ reincarnated, he was one of 3 or 4 Jesus Christs I've been blessed to meet in this incarnation. And he began a tirade that you don't have truth consciousness. That's why you don't believe in me. You don't have truth consciousness. There we go. So the important thing, I will act according to your word. I will live everything you said. That's a big commitment, but it's a necessary commitment. All right. Well, we're, of course, over as it is usual, but we'll go further because Sanjaya is going to wind it up. Remember in the beginning, Dhritarashtra, the blind king, whose horrible son Duryodhana was there on the battlefield heading the forces that opposed Krishna. He had said, tell me, on the battlefield, actually Dharma Kshetra, on the field of Dharma, at Kurukshetra, what did my son and the sons of Pandu do? So then Sanjaya, who'd been given the gift by Vyasa, who was an avatar himself, literally so, had given him the ability to, and since he says, what are they, he didn't say, what are they doing? He said, what did they do? Therefore, he saw into the past and he relayed to Dhritarashtra what he was seeing. I want to say that because I have heard, I'm sorry to say, a few Indians say one of the dumbest things I've ever come across. I believe there was television in the past because the Bhagavad Gita shows that Sanjaya was watching television, that he was watching Krishna and Arjuna and was hearing what they had to say. Now, do you really believe that a television camera crew was on a battlefield and that somebody was holding the microphone? Okay, Arjuna, what do you say? Oh, Krishna, what do you have to say? I mean, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, be a devotee, but why a fool? But in case you hear this crap, kindly know it isn't possible. They didn't need television. The yogis didn't need television in those days. And they don't still need it now. For example, my sannyasa guru, when I was staying there, I had a little kind of cottage hut of my own near the main building where he lived. And I wanted to do some laundry. And so I thought, well, I run out of soap, cake soap, not our fancy stuff in the box. So I thought, well, I'll go ask Swamiji for some. So I walked over, and when I came up to the door of his room, the door opened, and he handed me a little piece of soap. And he said, this is all I've got, but that will be enough for that one piece. It was a kurta, a shirt that I wanted to wash. So he knew I was going to want soap, and he knew it was for just a piece. Swamiji sometimes knew what I was going to think 24 hours before I did it. Literally so. Before I thought the idea, he knew it. Oh, let me tell a little bit more because I love to talk about him. I may have mentioned, I may not have, that I was reading the Gita in the main room, kind of the satsang hall of the ashram building. That's not grandeur, it was just a very small building. But I was sitting there, and he had a lot of correspondence. And he was sitting there at a little kind of a thing that functions as a desk in India when you sit on the floor. And he was writing. And I was reading the Gita, and I came to one particular verse. I don't remember what it was. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And I thought, that. And he put the pen down very quietly, no pretentious stuff. He said, no, that's not exactly it. And he explained to me the verse. He said, do you understand? I said, yes, thank you. He said, all right. Then, 5-10 minutes later, I was at a verse thinking, oh, yes. And I put it down and said, no, not that either. And he explained it to me. He did it 3 times. So he's writing letters and following my mind at the same time. And you see, what it means is, I was like, ooh, wasn't he miraculous? No, it means, Krishna says, I'm seated in the heart of every creature. Now, I don't think Swami Vidyananda was in the heart of every creature, but he sure was in the mind of Nirmalananda. Because his consciousness was expanded, it was vast. I remember one time, the headmaster of the school that he had founded had gone to some kind of a function, educational type function, in Calcutta. And he was to come back And when he came back, there was something he was supposed to bring. I forget what it was, but he was going to bring. And that Swami Vidyananda could really use. So uh, it was getting toward evening. And I said, well, where's the headmaster? Because the way the buses ran, we were 14 miles out of a major town. And so Swamiji sat there. He kind of looked to the side. They just got real still. They said, oh, he's been invited by a friend to go to his house. And so he's going there, and so he won't be here tomorrow. And so when the headmaster arrived there, who do you suppose said, oh, we expected you yesterday. Uh, how is it you came today? He said, oh, I met a really good friend of mine. And he wanted me to come and actually spend the night at his house. So I did it. So it is. So he says, thus have I heard this wondrous dialogue of Krishna and the great soul Arjuna, which causes a hair to stand on end. Like, when you're just utterly thrilled, or you're like, we say, oh, I got a chill and so on. He means that it just thrills you and awes you. And so it is with the Gita. By the grace of Vyasa have I heard this supreme and most secret yoga. As I say, he'd been given that psychic ability, which apparently is only temporary. By the grace of Vyasa have I heard this supreme and most secret yoga directly from Krishna, yoga's Lord, Yogeshwara, the Ishwara, the God of yoga, himself declaring it. O King, remembering again and again this marvelous dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, I rejoice again and again. Murhur mur. I didn't read it and say, oh, this is wonderful. This is just great. No, I remember it, and again I rejoice. And we should read it again and again and rejoice in it. But in other words, just the thought of the Gita is a joyful thought. The truths of the Gita, of course, are the thing. And remembering again and again that most marvelous form of Krishna, because the infinite being came down and took a form. And he is called enchanter of the mind. He has many sundara, beautiful. There are many terms for Krishna, expressing just the wonder of seeing him, you see. So, remembering again and again that most marvelous form of Krishna, great is my wonder, O King, and I rejoice again and again. Now, this is the last verse. Wherever there is Krishna, yoga's Lord. Because could Krishna really leave the world? No, he just became no longer visible to the world. But being God, well, he's right here. He had the infinity of God. He was, I don't mean he was a puppet that God moved around on. He was an individual jiva, and he had gone to the top and united absolutely with Ishwara, with God, the Absolute. And then when he came down to earth, he was God incarnate. That's what an avatar is. Avatar means the coming down. Well, you can't come down if you haven't gone up first. See, God's always way up there and down here, so he doesn't come down. So the very term means it is a self-realized being, but a totally self-realized, absolutely realized being who has been perfected from world to world, and his consciousness expanded until it's the consciousness of God. It's infinite. So, Wherever there is Krishna, Yoga's Lord. Wherever is Arjuna the bowman. Does that mean when you have a spiritual life, suddenly Arjuna is there too? No, you are Arjuna. In other words, wherever this divine message is, and wherever there is someone who is truly listening, truly awakening through it, and comprehending it, and is assimilating it, so it's in their life. Where that is, where this truth is, and where someone who will and wills to embody that truth and comprehends that truth, of course, there will forever be splendor, victory, wealth. There's all kinds of wealth, but outer and inner, and righteousness. This is my conviction. This is my firm conviction, but it's based on the knowledge, which even Sanjaya himself, he had to be an incredibly pure person to be able to have that spiritual clairvoyance. And he was an Arjuna, listening in a sense. And so such, he didn't believe, such he knew. What else more is there to be? When you've come to the end of the road, where else is there to go? I had notes. I tore it out of my notebook and put it in a wastebasket because I no longer need it. And for the knowledge of these truths, you no longer really need me. It'll be nice if you watch some of these talks over again, and so on, yes. But read the Gita itself, read the Gita, ponder the Gita, read it slowly. Of course, it's so wonderful. I mean, I devoured it, I have to admit that. But then I went back and verse by verse, line by line, I thought, what's this saying to me? And so there it is, by the grace of Krishna, by the grace of Vyasa, who recorded it, by the grace of those who printed who made and printed translations of the Gita, by all that, we've come to the end. And it is, I hope it's not just a relief to you who've heard, but it is a glorious end because it is the glory of God, the glory of you, and the glory of me. Now, what more is there to be said? Said he as he keeps looking at the little red button he has to click to stop. Therefore, Om Shri Ganeshaya Namah. Namaste, namaste, namaste.